young men in particular are never taught this. Do you want to be competent and dangerous, or do you want to be vague and useless? Because those are your options, and I don't care what your job is. It doesn't matter what you end up doing. If you're a plumber, I have great respect for plumbers, by the way, and you're articulate, you can negotiate with your clients, you can introduce your coworkers, you can make a case for your employees, you can advertise your services, you can think through your problems. You're firing on all cylinders. Our whole culture is based on the idea that it is the word itself that extracts habitable order from chaos and possibility. And the reason our culture is predicated on that is because it's a deep truth. And to the degree that our culture actually embodies that, it works. To young men who are striving forward, and to let them know in no uncertain terms that if they want to make themselves into forces to be contended with, that there's no surer route to that than an exceptional poetic literacy. The greatest people I've met, including great warriors, you might say, are great in no small part because they're articulate. I know a former special services, special operations soldier, Jocko Willink. Some of you might know about Jocko. He's got a pretty decent online following, and he's about 4 feet wide and about 3 feet thick, and he's one tough son of a bitch. I'll tell you, you don't want to mess with him, and he knows perfectly well and is very capable of articulating the fact that his success as a eminent warrior is in no small part dependent on his ability to communicate. Because he could communicate well, he could listen to the men. Because he was articulate, he could explain to his superiors the situation on the ground. Because he was articulate, he could make a case that the men under his command who were deserving would be promoted. Because he could think in an articulate manner, he could plan strategically and not lose battles. And what's the alternative? You want to be inarticulate? You want to say and like and and pause and stumble and be unable to formulate a strategy, be unable to elucidate a vision, be unable to compel and convince other people, to entice them with articulated vision of what might be? You want the opposite of that? Why would you want that? You would choose awkwardness over grace? It's preposterous. It's beyond foolish. So, how do you become articulate? Well, by paying attention to what you say. That's a good start. And what do I mean by that? I mean, pay attention to what you say. You can think of this as an analogy. So, imagine that you're trying to walk across a swamp, and the swamp is murky. But you know there's a path. You know there's a path of stone under the water, but it twists and moves. And if you stay on the path, you won't drown. The crocodiles in the swamp won't devour you. And as you walk forward, you can feel with your next step where the stone might be. And then you feel it's solid, then you take that step, and then you do the same thing with your foot again. You search and you find out what's solid, and you step on it, and you move forward in that manner. That's what you do with your words. It's the same thing. You feel, and you feel, is this the right word? Is the fact that I'm uttering it putting me together and making me intact and stronger, or is it tearing me apart and making me dissolute and weak? And you can learn to do that. I learned this in part from reading Carl Rogers, who's a great clinician, and Rogers believed that the integration of language and action was a necessary precondition for operation as an effective clinician. That you had to align what you said with who you were, and that one of the things that your clients would be evaluating you for was that capability. And you might say that someone with that capability manifests themselves as genuine and trustworthy. And more than that, I would say also as compelling and interesting, although that can be gamed. But the entire combination that emerges out of the domain of articulate communication can't be gamed. It's not easily. You feel your way. I noticed 40 years ago when I started thinking these things through that much of what I said actually made me feel weak. I didn't know why exactly, but sometimes some of the things I said didn't have that effect. They weren't accompanied by a sense of shame, let's say. They weren't accompanied with a sense of vulnerability. They were solid. And at the beginning, that was probably only about 5% of what I said. The rest of it was instrumental. You know, it was language I was using to get my way, and the arrogance in my use of language that had to do with the desire to attain proximal victories, right? To appear smart, let's say, to win an argument, something like that. A very different idea than merely feeling my way along to see what word was appropriate for what moment. But you can learn to do that. And you can listen to yourself, and you can stop humming and hawing and using like and you know and fillers. And you can take the time necessary to craft your words carefully. And you can practice merely saying what you believe to be true. And you can read. And you can read great writers, and you can write. And you can write about what you think about the problems that obsess you. And you can become articulate as a consequence. And there'll be nothing about that that isn't the adventure of your life. And so it's a moral endeavor in some real sense. Right? To become articulate is to become the master of your own tongue. And to become properly articulate is to make the word divine. And to treat it in that manner. And to decide whether or not you believe that it is the case that the divine word creates the order that's habitable and good. And if you do believe that, well, if you don't believe that, then what do you believe? And if you do believe that, well, go all in. See what happens. See what happens if you become articulate.